We've agreed you're no longer part of the family. My wife said at dinner. Don't come home anymore. Don't come to any gatherings. My daughter nodded in agreement. I replied, thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments. By 12:03 a.m. Look, I've had some monumentally bad days in my 42 years on this spinning rock we call Earth, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for having my entire existence canceled over a medium-rare ribeye at Giovanni's Italian Steakhouse. You know, the kind of place with cloth napkins that cost more than most people's car payments and breadsticks that arrive with the kind of pretentious olive oil that has its own Wikipedia page. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to get emotionally obliterated in a restaurant where I'd celebrated our 10th anniversary, Madison's 8th grade graduation, and Clara's promotion to regional sales manager of whatever pyramid scheme she was pretending was a real job that month. We were sitting in one of those corner booths that rich people love because it gives them the illusion of privacy while still letting everyone see how successful they think they are. The lighting was that dim, romantic kind that makes everyone look 10 years younger and hides the fact that you're basically eating in a cave with chandeliers. Clara was wearing her serious conversation outfit, the black dress that cost more than my first car, paired with those shoes that looked like medieval torture devices but apparently made her feel powerful. Madison, my 16-year-old daughter who I used to think hung the moon, was glued to her iPhone like it was surgically attached, her acrylic nails clicking against the screen with the rhythm of a tiny, annoying drum solo. I should have known something was up when Clara ordered the most expensive steak on the menu without even glancing at the price. Usually, she at least pretended to care about the bill, doing that performative thing where she'd squint at the menu and say something like, "Oh, that seems a bit much," before ordering it anyway. But tonight, nothing. She ordered that $48 ribeye like she was ordering a value meal at McDonald's. Red flag number 1, folks. Red flag number freaking 1. The waiter, this young kid named Tyler who was probably working his way through community college and definitely didn't get paid enough to witness what was about to happen, brought out our entrees with the kind of flourish that suggested he'd been practicing in front of a mirror. Bone-in ribeye for the lady, grilled salmon for the young miss, and roasted chicken for the gentleman, he announced, like he was introducing royalty. I wanted to tell him to run, to get out while he still could, because this dinner was about to go sideways faster than a shopping cart with a broken wheel. Clara picked up her knife and fork with the precision of a surgeon, cut into that steak like she was dissecting something in biology class, and without even looking up at me, said, "We've agreed you're no longer part of the family." Just like that. No preamble. No, honey, we need to talk. No warning sirens or emergency broadcast system alerts. Just straight to the point, like she was telling me we were out of milk or that she'd picked up my dry cleaning. Don't come home anymore. Don't come to any gatherings. She popped a piece of steak into her mouth and chewed thoughtfully, like she'd just commented on the weather instead of dropping a nuclear bomb directly into my lap. I'm not gonna lie, my first instinct was to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because my brain literally couldn't process what had just happened. It was like that moment in a horror movie when the protagonist realizes the call is coming from inside the house. Except instead of a serial killer, it was my wife of 15 years telling me I'd been voted off the island. And the kicker? The we, she kept referencing. We've agreed, she said. Since when did my family become a democracy I wasn't invited to participate in? Was there a family meeting I missed? Did they send out a memo? Was there a vote? Did they use one of those apps where everyone puts in their opinion and the majority rules? Madison didn't even look up from her phone. She just nodded, like Clara had asked her if she wanted dessert instead of essentially telling me I'd been fired from being a father and husband. That nod, man. That tiny little head bob that said, "Yeah, Mom's right, you're out," without even having the decency to make eye contact. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned, calculated. They'd probably discussed it over morning lattes at Starbucks while I was at work, earning the money that paid for those lattes. For a solid 10 seconds, I just sat there, my fork hovering somewhere between my plate and my mouth, trying to figure out if I was having a stroke or if this was actually happening. The restaurant sounds around me seemed to get louder, the clinking of silverware, the pretentious laughter from the table near the bar where some guy was definitely lying about his golf handicap. The subtle jazz music that was supposed to be soothing but now felt like a soundtrack to my personal apocalypse. But here's the thing about being an accountant for 20 years. You learn to keep your cool when the numbers don't add up. You learn to smile and nod when clients tell you they forgot to report that extra 50 grand in income. You develop this beautiful skill of appearing calm while your brain is doing backflips and calculating worst-case scenarios. So I did what I do best. I set down my fork, took a slow sip of water from that overpriced Pellegrino they charge $8 for, smiled like I'd just been told I won the lottery, and said, "Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments." The silence that followed was absolutely magnificent. You could have heard a pin drop in that noisy-ass restaurant. Clara's knife froze mid-cut, her eyes going wide like I'd just told her the steak was made of cardboard. Madison's thumb actually stopped scrolling, and if you know teenagers, you know that's basically a medical miracle. Even Tyler the waiter, who was refilling water glasses at the next table, did this subtle double take like he knew he'd just witnessed something legendary. Clara blinked at me, her mouth opening and closing like a confused goldfish. "What?" she managed to squeak out, her voice about 3 octaves higher than normal. But I was done. I was so incredibly, beautifully done. I pulled out my wallet, the same wallet that had been funding their lifestyle for the past 15 years, and placed enough cash on the table to cover the bill plus a 30% tip. Because unlike some people, I still believe in taking care of folks who actually work for a living. "Thanks for dinner," I said, standing up and straightening my tie. "Tyler, the chicken was excellent. You folks have a wonderful evening." And then I walked out of Giovanni's Italian steakhouse with my head held high, leaving behind a half-eaten chicken breast and the smoldering remains of what used to be my family. I sat in my car in the parking lot for exactly 3 minutes, just breathing and watching the neon sign flicker outside. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. By the time I pulled into my office parking garage 20 minutes later, I'd canceled the electric bill, the gas bill, the water bill, the internet service, the cable package, Clara's gym membership at that bougie place with the eucalyptus towels, Madison's Spotify Premium, the car insurance on Clara's BMW, and, my personal favorite, the monthly subscription to that meal kit service Clara never actually cooked, but loved to post photos of on Instagram. At exactly 12:03 a.m., while I was sitting in my office chair eating leftover Chinese food and watching reruns of The Office, their perfect little world started going dark. No internet for Madison's precious TikTok videos. No electricity for Clara's curling iron. No hot water for those hour-long showers that wasted enough water to fill a swimming pool. Turns out when you kick out the family accountant, Netflix goes with him. So does Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, and every other streaming service they'd forgotten I was paying for. My phone started buzzing around 12:15 a.m. I looked at Clara's name flashing on the screen, smiled, and set my phone face down on my desk. Then I took another bite of lo mein and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Absolute, unadulterated peace. Here's the thing about getting dumped by your wife at a fancy restaurant. It gives you a lot of time to think about where everything went wrong, and more importantly, when you became so pathetically blind to the fact that you weren't in a marriage, but rather a never-ending subscription service that kept auto-renewing every month without your actual consent. I spent that first night after the dinner disaster sitting in my office, which had become more of a home to me than our actual 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in the suburbs anyway, just running through the highlight reel of our 15-year marriage like some kind of masochistic film student analyzing a really depressing indie movie. Clara and I met at a corporate mixer in 2010, back when people still thought those things were a good idea instead of the awkward networking hellscapes they actually are. She was working as a receptionist at a dental office, and I was a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm, wearing a suit that cost more than my rent and trying to pretend I knew what I was doing with my life. She had this laugh. God, that laugh. That could light up a room full of boring finance bros talking about tax codes and quarterly projections. It was infectious, genuine, and made me feel like maybe I wasn't just another calculator with legs. That laugh was what made me fall in love with her. Turns out, that laugh was also her greatest acting performance, because I'd learned over the years that it came out whenever she needed something, wanted something, or was about to spend money we didn't have on something we definitely didn't need. The first few years were actually pretty good, or at least that's what I told myself while I was reorganizing my mental filing cabinet of memories at 2 in the morning. We had a tiny apartment in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which is realtor speak for kind of sketchy, but we promise it'll be nice eventually. We ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit. Binge-watched Netflix on a TV we'd bought off Craigslist for $60 and genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company. Clara would curl up next to me on our thrift store couch and talk about her dreams. Opening her own business, traveling to Italy, maybe having a kid or two. I'd tell her about making partner at the firm someday, about how I'd take care of her, about how we'd build something real together. And here's where I really need to give myself credit for being the world's biggest idiot. I actually did it. I worked my ass off, pulled 70-hour weeks, survived on coffee and granola bars, and climbed that corporate ladder like it was my personal Mount Everest. By year 5, I'd made senior accountant. By year 8, I was pulling in 6 figures. By year 10, I'd made partner, and we'd moved into that picture-perfect suburban house with the manicured lawn and the 2-car garage. Madison was born in year 3, and watching Clara hold our daughter for the first time made me think that maybe, just maybe, all those extra hours and missed dinners and sacrificed weekends were worth it. But somewhere between for better and for worse, we'd taken a hard left turn into for ATM machine. Clara had started her business ventures, and I use that term so loosely it barely counts as a term anymore. First, it was the boutique clothing line that lasted 6 months and cost me $15,000 in startup costs. Then it was the essential oils pyramid scheme that she swore wasn't a pyramid scheme, but definitely had a triangle-shaped business model. After that came the life coaching certification, the real estate license she never used, the Etsy shop that sold exactly 3 items, all purchased by her mother, and most recently, some kind of wellness consulting thing that seemed to consist entirely of posting inspirational quotes on Instagram and drinking green smoothies at expensive cafes. Every single one of these ventures required capital, my capital. Every single one came with a PowerPoint presentation about investing in our future and believing in each other's dreams. And every single time, like a complete chump, I'd wire the money from our joint account and watch it evaporate faster than water in the Mojave Desert. But here's what really got me. What kept me up at night now that I was finally processing all of this? She never once said thank you. Not genuinely, anyway. It was always this performative gratitude, the kind you give when someone holds the door open for you. Thanks, babe, she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. Like I'd just picked up milk from the grocery store instead of funding her latest fantasy. And Madison. Oh, Madison. My sweet baby girl who used to think I hung the moon and the stars, who used to draw me crayon pictures of us holding hands with Best Daddy, written in backwards letters, who used to wait by the door when I came home from work and jump into my arms like I was a superhero. Somewhere around her 13th birthday, that little girl had been replaced by a teenager who'd learned every trick in her mother's playbook. The selective amnesia, the ability to ask for things without actually asking, the talent for making you feel guilty for not providing something you didn't even know she wanted. Last year, and I'm not exaggerating here, I spent $28,000 on Madison alone. I had the spreadsheets to prove it, because of course I did. Private tutoring for classes she was failing because she spent more time on TikTok than studying. For Grant, the essential spring break trip to Cancun with her friends that she absolutely needed to go on, or she'd literally die of social embarrassment. $3,000. The new iPhone because her perfectly functional 6-month-old iPhone was so cringe. Dad, oh my God. $1,200. Designer clothes from brands I couldn't even pronounce. Another $5,000, easy. A car for her 16th birthday. Not just any car, but a used Audi because everyone else has nice cars. $15,000. And you know what I got for all that? A nod at dinner while her mother kicked me out of the family. A freaking nod. Like I was some employee getting downsized during corporate restructuring. Yeah, mom's right. Dad's out. Can I get the Wi-Fi password for wherever we're going next? I sat there in my office chair, spinning slowly and staring at the ceiling tiles that I'd memorized during countless late nights, and replayed that dinner conversation for probably the 100th time. We've agreed, Clara had said. We've agreed. Like it was a business decision made by a board of directors. Like our marriage and family was some kind of corporation where I'd been outvoted by the other shareholders. When exactly did that vote happen? Was it over breakfast while I was at the gym? Was it during one of their mother-daughter shopping trips that I'd funded? Was there a family group chat I wasn't included in where they'd been planning this coup for weeks? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that's exactly what had happened. I'd been strategically excluded from my own family, slowly and methodically pushed to the margins until I was nothing more than a walking, talking checking account. I wasn't Clara's husband. I was her financial advisor who occasionally shared a bed with her. I wasn't Madison's father. I was the guy who paid for stuff and occasionally said no, which made me the villain in her teenage drama. Clara loved her image more than she'd ever loved me, and that was becoming crystal clear in the harsh fluorescent lighting of my office at 2:30 in the morning. Her whole life was a carefully curated Instagram story. The perfect house, the perfect car, the perfect outfits for her wine nights with the other suburban moms who probably all hated each other but smiled for the camera. Those brunches at trendy restaurants where they'd order $20 avocado toast and complain about their husbands while I was literally paying for them to complain about me. The girls' trips to Napa Valley and Charleston and wherever else they decided they needed to go to reconnect and find themselves, which apparently cost $3,000 a pop and required a whole new wardrobe each time. And that fake laugh. Jesus Christ, that laugh that had made me fall in love with her had become her weapon of choice. She'd deploy it at dinner parties when someone told a joke that wasn't funny, at PTA meetings when she was schmoozing with the other moms, during phone calls with her mother when they were talking about me like I wasn't in the next room. It was all performance art, and I'd been the idiot in the audience who kept buying tickets to the show. I used to think love was teamwork. I used to believe in the whole partnership thing, where two people built a life together, supported each other, had each other's backs through thick and thin. But looking back now with the clarity that only comes from getting emotionally sucker-punched in an Italian restaurant, I realized the truth. I wasn't part of a team. I was the team. I was the player, the coach, the water boy, the guy selling concessions, and the janitor cleaning up after the game. Clara and Madison were just spectators who occasionally showed up to complain that their seats weren't good enough. The betrayal wasn't even the worst part, though. The worst part was that it had been done so casually, so matter-of-factly, like canceling a gym membership or switching cell phone providers. 15 years of marriage, 16 years of being a father, and I got dumped like an expired Amazon Prime subscription that wasn't offering enough value anymore. No emotion, no tears, no, it's not you, it's me speech. Just, we've agreed you're out, while cutting into a steak I'd paid for. My phone buzzed again on my desk. Another call from Clara. I looked at it, watched her name flash on the screen, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just a weird sense of relief mixed with the kind of grim satisfaction you get when you finally cancel a subscription you forgot you had and realize you've been wasting money on it for years. I picked up my phone, opened my notes app, and started typing. Things I've learned tonight. 1. Love isn't teamwork when you're the only one working. 2. Family isn't family when they vote you out. 3. The best revenge is a well-organized spreadsheet. Then I set my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting everything. Tonight, I'd just enjoy the silence. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning still sitting in my office chair with a crick in my neck that felt like someone had tied my spine into a pretzel, dried drool on my cheek, and my phone vibrating so aggressively across my desk that it sounded like an angry hornet trying to escape from a tin can. For a beautiful, blissful 3 seconds, I thought maybe the whole dinner thing had been a nightmare, one of those weird stress dreams where your teeth fall out or you show up to work naked. But then I grabbed my phone and saw the notification screen, and oh boy, reality came crashing back like a freight train loaded with karma and receipts. 47 missed calls. 47. I'd slept through exactly 4 hours and managed to rack up more missed calls than a drug dealer during spring break. 32 were from Clara, which honestly showed a level of persistence I wish she'd applied to literally any of her failed business ventures. 12 were from Madison, which was shocking because I didn't think she knew phones could make actual calls instead of just hosting TikTok and Instagram. 2 were from Clara's mother, Patricia, aka Mother Debit Card, which was the nickname I'd given her in my head after the 5th time she'd called asking me to help out with her property taxes. And 1 was from an unknown number, which was probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty, but honestly felt less threatening than the other 46. The text messages were even better, and by better, I mean, they were an absolute gold mine of entitlement and panic that would have made a reality TV producer weep with joy. I scrolled through them like I was reading the world's saddest, most expensive comedy routine. Clara, 12:47 a.m. Leo, pick up your phone. Clara, 12:52 a.m. This isn't funny. Clara, 1:03 a.m. What did you do? Clara, 1:15 a.m. The internet is out. Clara, 1:23 a.m. Leo, the first swear to God. Clara, 1:41 a.m. You're being childish. Clara, 2:18 a.m. Fine. Don't answer. We'll figure it out without you. That last one was particularly hilarious considering they literally couldn't figure out how to turn the Wi-Fi back on without me. But sure, Clara, you go ahead and figure it out. Maybe try Googling it. Oh wait, you can't, because I canceled the internet. Oopsie. Madison's messages were somehow even more entertaining in their complete lack of self-awareness. Madison, 1:34 a.m. Dad, my Wi-Fi's dead. Madison, 1:36 a.m. Dad. Madison, 1:38 a.m. This is so unfair. Madison, 1:45 a.m. How am I supposed to do my homework? Madison, 2:02 a.m. Kaylee's mom would never do this to her. Madison, 2:34 a.m. I hate you. That homework excuse was particularly rich considering Madison's idea of homework was copying answers from Chegg while watching Netflix and texting her friends. And the I hate you text? That actually stung for about half a second before I remembered that she'd nodded along while her mother kicked me out of the family, so maybe her feelings weren't exactly my top priority anymore. I sat there in my office chair, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt and pants that smelled like Giovanni's Italian steakhouse and existential crisis, and felt something bubbling up inside me. At first I thought maybe it was a heart attack, which would have been inconvenient, but not entirely surprising given the circumstances. But then I realized what it was: laughter. Pure, unfiltered, slightly maniacal laughter. I was laughing so hard I had tears streaming down my face, and somewhere in the back of my mind I wondered if I'd finally snapped, if this was what a nervous breakdown felt like. But honestly, it felt amazing. Because here's the thing. After 15 years of being taken for granted, of being treated like a human ATM machine with legs, of funding every ridiculous whim, an expensive hobby, an emergency shopping trip, I'd finally done something that made them actually notice I existed. Not as a husband or father, but as the guy who paid for stuff. And now that the stuff wasn't being paid for anymore, suddenly I was very, very important. I made myself a cup of coffee using the ancient Keurig machine in the office break room that probably violated several health codes, grabbed my laptop, and decided it was time to do what I did best: turn chaos into organized, beautiful, devastating spreadsheets. If Clara and Madison wanted to treat our family like a business transaction, then by God, I was going to give them a full financial audit. I opened Excel, my old friend, my faithful companion, the only relationship in my life that had never let me down, and created a new workbook. I titled it The Collins Family Financial History, a Tragedy in Numbers. Then I created columns: date, amount, category, recipient, purpose, and my personal favorite, thank you received, Y/N. That last column was going to be hilarious because, spoiler alert, it was going to be almost entirely ends. I started with the big stuff, the expenses that had actually required conscious decisions and multiple zeros. The house. I'd put down 80 grand as a down payment in 2015, money I'd saved from bonuses and tax refunds, and basically never eating lunch anywhere that didn't have a dollar menu. I typed it in, $80,000, house down payment, Clara, so we could live in the right neighborhood. In the right neighborhood, by the way, was code for the place where all her friends lived so she could keep up with the Joneses, or in this case, the Hendersons and the Martinez family, and those insufferable people next door with the matching Range Rovers. Then came Madison's private school tuition, $22,000 a year for 13 years, because apparently the perfectly good public school 3 blocks away wasn't good enough for our precious angel. I did the math, $286,000 in tuition alone. $286,000 so Madison could go to a school with a pretentious Latin motto and a lacrosse team. I added it to the spreadsheet and felt my eye twitch a little. Clara's car, That gorgeous silver BMW X5 that she'd begged for because I need something safe for Madison. $58,000, plus another 12 grand in maintenance over the years because German engineering apparently means expensive as hell to fix when literally anything breaks. Into the spreadsheet it went. The family vacations. Oh God, the vacations. Disney World twice, because apparently once wasn't enough magical memories. Hawaii for our 10th anniversary, where Clara had posted approximately 900 photos on Instagram and spent more time finding the perfect angle for her beach selfies than actually talking to me. That ski trip to Colorado where none of us actually knew how to ski, but Clara insisted we needed to learn because everyone skis. The cruise to the Caribbean where I'd gotten food poisoning and spent 3 days in our cabin while Clara and Madison enjoyed the all-inclusive buffets I was paying for. Altogether, probably 70 grand, easy. $70,000 in making memories that apparently didn't matter enough to keep me in the family. I kept going, getting more detailed, more petty, more beautifully vindictive with each entry. Clara's gym membership at that bougie place with the eucalyptus towels and the kombucha on tap, $2 for $100 a year for 6 years. Her weekly nail appointments, $80 a pop, times 52 weeks, times however many years she'd been getting them. Her Botox appointments that she thought I didn't know about, $600 every 4 months like clockwork. The wine nights with her friends where they'd split $300 bottles, and somehow the bill always ended up on my credit card. The retail therapy shopping trips that happened every time she was stressed, which was apparently every other Wednesday. Madison's expenses were equally impressive in their absurdity. That car I'd bought her, 15 grand for a used Audi because, Dad, I can't drive a Honda. That's so embarrassing. Her phone bills, $120 a month because she needed unlimited everything to maintain her social media presence. The college prep courses she'd begged for and then attended maybe 3 times. The homecoming dresses, the prom dresses, the dresses for dances, I'd never even heard of that apparently required brand new designer outfits every single time. The spring break trip, the summer camps, the ski trips with friends, the concert tickets to see artists I'd never heard of and couldn't pick out of a lineup. Every single expense became a line item. Every bill became a memory. Every payment became proof that I'd been the world's most dedicated ATM machine, dispensing cash on demand without ever getting so much as a receipt or a genuine thank you. The spreadsheet grew longer and longer, and with each entry, I felt lighter somehow, like I was exorcising demons through data entry. By the time I finished, it was almost noon, and I had a document that was 17 pages long and totaled just over $1.2 million. $1.2 million over 15 years of marriage. That number just sat there at the bottom of my spreadsheet, mocking me, showing me exactly how much it had cost to be treated like garbage by the people I'd loved most in the world. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 different cloud services because I'm not an idiot, and leaned back in my chair. My phone was still buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored it. Let them panic. Let them figure out how to function without me bankrolling their lifestyle. I had spreadsheets to make and spite to organize. Funny thing about numbers, they don't lie. Every "I love you" over the years had an average cost of about $4,800. Every "thank you" rang up at around $6,200. And every time Clara had said, "we're family," it had cost me roughly $11,000. Turns out family isn't priceless after all. It's very, very expensive. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, my phone had basically achieved sentience and was staging a full-blown rebellion against me. It was vibrating so constantly that it had actually moved 3 inches across my desk, like one of those wind-up toys you get from a grocery store vending machine for a quarter. I put it on silent around noon, but I could still see the screen lighting up like a demented disco ball every 30 seconds with another incoming call. Clara had apparently decided that if she just kept calling, eventually I'd crack and answer, which showed a fundamental misunderstanding of both my personality and how telephones work. But then the call stopped being just from Clara, and that's when things got really interesting. At 2:17 p.m., I watched as Patricia Mobile flashed across my screen, and I actually laughed out loud, startling Derek from accounting, who was microwaving fish in the break room like an absolute psychopath. Patricia, my mother-in-law, the woman who had raised Clara to believe that money grew on trees and that those trees were specifically located in other people's backyards. Patricia, who I'd privately nicknamed Mother Debit Card, after the 15th time she'd called asking me to help out with some emergency that always seemed to require exactly the amount of money she'd recently spent on a cruise or a new handbag. I let it ring. 4 times, 8 times, 12 times. The woman had the persistence of a telemarketer and the entitlement of someone who'd never paid for anything themselves in their entire life. Finally, on ring number 15, and I'm not exaggerating, I counted, I picked up. "Hello, Patricia," I said, using my best customer service voice, the one I reserved for difficult clients and people trying to sell me extended car warranties. "Leo Collins, what in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ do you think you're doing to my daughter?" she screeched, her voice hitting a pitch that probably violated several noise ordinances and definitely hurt my eardrum. Patricia had this way of bringing religion into everything despite the fact that I'd never seen her inside a church except for weddings and funerals, and even then only if they had a decent reception afterward. "Well, Patricia, I'm currently sitting in my office reviewing financial documents," I said calmly, clicking my pen in a rhythm that I knew would annoy her. "How's your day going?" "Don't you sass me, young man," she snapped, which was hilarious because I was 42 years old and hadn't been a young man since the Clinton administration. Clara called me in tears. "Tears, Leo, saying you've shut off all the utilities. Do you know what you've done? Madison can't even charge her phone. That does sound like a crisis," I replied, my voice dripping with so much sarcasm it could have corroded metal. "Perhaps Madison could use this as an opportunity to read a book. I hear they don't require electricity. Very old-school technology, books. Been around for centuries." "This isn't funny," Patricia bellowed, and I could hear her doing that thing she did when she was really worked up, that sharp intake of breath that sounded like she was trying to inhale the entire atmosphere. "How could you do this to your family? These are your responsibilities. You can't just abandon them because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." And there it was, the word that made my blood pressure spike faster than Clara's credit card bills. Responsibilities. As if I hadn't spent 15 years being responsible. As if I hadn't been the most responsible person in a family of people who thought responsibility was something other people dealt with while they went shopping. "Interesting choice of words, Patricia," I said, leaning back in my chair and staring at the ceiling tiles I'd memorized during countless late nights. "Let me ask you something. When your daughter told me I was no longer part of the family, was that her being responsible? When she said I couldn't come home anymore, couldn't come to family gatherings, was that responsible? Or is responsibility just another word for Leo pays for everything and keeps his mouth shut?" Silence. Beautiful, blessed silence. I could practically hear Patricia's brain short-circuiting as she tried to figure out how to spin this situation into something that was still somehow my fault. "Well," she finally sputtered, "family is family. You don't just give up on family because of one argument." "You're absolutely right," I agreed cheerfully. Which is why it's so interesting that I was the one who got voted out of the family at dinner last night. Fascinating how that works, isn't it? But hey, Patricia, here's a thought. Since you're so concerned about Clara and Madison's well-being, maybe you could help out with the utility bills? I'm sure they'd appreciate it. The electric company doesn't care about whose responsibility it is. They just want their money. I don't. That's not. Patricia stammered, which was exactly the response I'd expected from a woman who had literally never paid for anything in her life without complaining about it first. "Easy," I said, cutting her off. "It's called logging out. You should try it sometime. Have a blessed day, Patricia." And then I hung up before she could respond, which felt so good I almost did a little victory dance right there in my office. I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it, though. Patricia wasn't the type to just accept defeat and move on with her life. She was the type to take her grievances to the court of public opinion, which in 2025 meant exactly what you'd think: Facebook. At 4:32 p.m., my phone dinged with a notification that I'd been tagged in a post, and against my better judgment, I opened it. The post was a masterpiece of manipulative, passive-aggressive, martyr-complex writing that would have made Shakespeare weep. It was titled, "When Family Forgets," which already made me want to throw my phone into the nearest body of water. And it just got better from there. "Sometimes people forget where they came from," Patricia had written, and I could practically hear her fake crying voice through the screen. "They forget who loved them, who supported them, who stood by them when they had nothing. They forget that family is supposed to be forever, not just until things get a little difficult. My heart is breaking today for my daughter and granddaughter, who are suffering because someone decided that money is more important than love. To my son-in-law, I pray that you remember what truly matters before it's too late. God sees everything. Hashtag family first, hashtag heartbroken, hashtag prayers needed. I stared at that post for a solid minute, watching the little icons pop up like mushrooms after rain. Patricia's church friends, Clara's wine night crew, random relatives I'd met maybe once at somebody's baby shower 7 years ago. They were all lining up to express their sympathy and outrage. The comments section was filling up fast with variations of "so sorry," "praying for you," and my personal favorite, "some people only care about money." But then, like an angel descending from heaven, or more accurately like a snarky aunt who didn't take crap from anyone descending from her home office where she probably worked in pajamas, Aunt Gina showed up. Gina was Clara's dad's sister, and she was the only person in that entire dysfunctional family tree who had ever treated me like an actual human being instead of a walking wallet. She'd made a fortune in real estate in the 90s, retired early, and now spent her time traveling, reading, and apparently lurking on Facebook waiting to call out BS when she saw it. Gina's comment appeared at 4:47 p.m., and it was perfect. "Patricia, didn't Leo pay for Clara's business degree? And the house? And Madison's school? Just asking for a friend." The comments section went silent for approximately 30 seconds, which in internet time is basically an eternity. I could imagine Patricia's face turning that particular shade of red that suggested an incoming stroke, frantically trying to figure out how to respond without admitting that yes, actually, I had paid for all of those things and approximately 900 other things besides. I screenshotted Gina's comment, saved it to my growing folder of evidence, and then did something I'd been putting off all day. I called Julian, my lawyer friend who I'd met in college and who had somehow remained my friend despite my terrible taste in spouses. Julian picked up on the second ring. "Leo, I was wondering when you'd call. I saw Patricia's Facebook post. That woman has the self-awareness of a goldfish. A goldfish with a persecution complex," I added, and Julian laughed, that deep, genuine laugh that always made me feel like maybe the world wasn't completely insane. "So," Julian said, and I could hear him settling into what I called his lawyer chair, probably leaning back with his feet up on his desk in that corner office he'd earned by being actually good at his job. "I'm guessing dinner didn't go well." I gave him the abbreviated version, the restaurant, the declaration, the nod, the auto payments. Julian stayed quiet through the whole thing, which was unusual for him because the man loved to interject with commentary. But when I finished, he just whistled low and said, "Damn, Leo. That's cold. I mean, I never liked Clara. You know that, but that's ice cold." "Right," I said, feeling validated in a way I hadn't felt in years. I've spent 15 years funding their lifestyle, and I get dumped like a Netflix subscription they don't watch anymore. "Okay," Julian said, and I could hear him switching into professional mode. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to document everything. Every payment, every bill, every expense. Make it detailed, make it thorough, make it so airtight that it could survive a nuclear apocalypse. Second, you're going to stop engaging with them. No calls, no texts, no responses to Facebook posts. Let the silence do the talking. Trust me on this. Nothing drives people crazier than being ignored." "I like where this is going," I said, pulling up my spreadsheet and feeling that familiar rush of satisfaction that came with good organization. "Third," Julian continued, "we're going to explore your legal options. If Clara wants to kick you out of the family, fine. But families have legal obligations, and I'm willing to bet she's violated a few of them. You let me worry about that part." We talked for another 20 minutes, going over details, discussing strategy, and by the time I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the dinner. Hope. Not hope that we'd reconcile or that things would go back to normal, because honestly, screw normal. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd come out of this thing okay. I looked at my phone one more time. 37 new notifications, all of them probably from Clara or Patricia or Madison. I swiped them all away, turned my phone face down, and smiled. Silence really was the funniest weapon. There's something deeply satisfying about revenge served cold, calculated, and formatted in Times New Roman 12-point font with proper margins. I discovered this at approximately 11:43 p.m. on what was technically the second night of my newfound freedom, sitting in my office with a cup of coffee that had gone cold 3 hours ago and a determination that burned hotter than 1,000 suns. Julian's advice kept echoing in my head: document everything, stay professional, let the silence do the talking. But I wanted to add my own twist to this recipe for justified payback. I wanted to send them something they couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss as me being emotional or irrational. Something that spoke their language while simultaneously terrifying them. I wanted to send them an invoice. Not just any invoice, though. Oh no. I wanted to send them the kind of correspondence that makes your stomach drop when you see it in your mailbox. The kind that has legal weight and professional formatting and makes you realize that maybe, just maybe, you've screwed with the wrong person. I'd spent 20 years working with corporations, dealing with contracts, drafting financial documents that could make grown men cry. I knew exactly how to make something sound official, binding, and absolutely terrifying without actually threatening anyone. I opened Outlook, because nothing says serious business like a properly formatted email from an actual email client instead of some casual text message, and started a new message. The to field was easy: Clara's email, Madison's email, and just for the absolute chaos of it, Patricia's email too. Because if we're going to do this, we might as well do it right. The CC field got Julian's work email, because every good corporate disaster needs a lawyer copied on it for authenticity. The subject line took me a solid 10 minutes to craft. It needed to be professional enough to be taken seriously, but ominous enough to make them panic. I went through several iterations. Regarding outstanding financial matters was too vague. Immediate payment required was too aggressive. Family account review was too casual. Finally, at 11:54 p.m., I landed on the perfect combination of corporate speak and implied doom. Outstanding balances, the Collins family account, action required. That action required at the end was chef's kiss, as Madison would say. It suggested urgency without being overtly threatening. It implied consequences without stating them explicitly. It was the email equivalent of a ticking clock in a movie, and I was here for it. The body of the email took even longer because I wanted it to be absolutely perfect. I channeled every corporate email I'd ever received from collections departments, legal teams, and HR departments that were about to fire someone. I used phrases like per our recent discussion and upon review of account history and in accordance with standard procedures. I even included a fake reference number at the top, REF, CF, 2025-1026-001. Because nothing says this is serious like an official-looking reference number that probably doesn't mean anything but sure looks important. Here's what I finally settled on at 11:58 p.m. Dear Clara, Madison, and Patricia, this correspondence serves as formal notification regarding outstanding financial obligations related to the Collins family account, REF, CF, 2025-1026-001. Per our recent discussion on October 25, 2025, at Giovanni's Italian Steakhouse, it was mutually agreed that I would no longer be considered part of the family unit and would therefore cease participation in all family activities and gatherings. In light of this restructuring of our familial relationship, I am hereby providing notice that all financial support previously extended will be discontinued effective immediately. Upon comprehensive review of account history spanning the period of 2010 to 2025, it has come to my attention that significant financial discrepancies exist regarding shared assets, joint accounts, and unilateral withdrawals made without proper authorization or consent. You are hereby notified that you have 30 calendar days from the date of this email to respond with a detailed accounting of all shared financial assets and to arrange for equitable distribution of said assets. Failure to respond within the specified time frame will result in the matter being forwarded to legal counsel for formal proceedings. For questions or clarifications regarding this matter, please direct all correspondence to my attorney, Julian Matthews, whose contact information is copied on this communication. This matter requires your immediate attention. Respectfully, Leo Collins, Certified Public Accountant. I read it over 3 times, checking for typos, making sure every comma was in the right place, ensuring that it sounded sufficiently corporate and intimidating without actually being actionable for harassment or anything else that could bite me in the ass later. It was beautiful. It was professional. It was the email equivalent of dropping a bomb wrapped in bubble wrap and tied with a bow. At exactly 11:58 p.m., my cursor hovered over the send button. I thought about all the years of being taken for granted, all the dismissive comments, all the times I'd been treated like my only value was the size of my paycheck. I thought about that nod at dinner, about Madison's complete indifference to my existence, about Clara's casual cruelty dressed up as a business decision. Then I clicked send and watched the email disappear into the digital void, headed straight for 3 separate inboxes like a heat-seeking missile aimed at their peace of mind. I sat back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and waited. Email delivery notifications popped up almost immediately. Delivered, delivered, delivered. All 3 of them had received it. Now it was just a matter of time before my phone exploded. And I mean exploded in the metaphorical sense, though at 12:10 a.m. it might as well have been literal for how aggressively it started vibrating, dinging, buzzing, and generally losing its mechanical mind. The responses came in so fast I could barely read them before another one appeared. Clara's email, sent at 12:03 a.m. What the hell is this, Leo? Are you seriously threatening us? This is insane. You've lost your mind. I'm calling my lawyer. I almost laughed at the "I'm calling my lawyer" part. Clara didn't have a lawyer. She had Janet from her book club who'd watched a lot of Law and Order and once helped her sister file for divorce. But sure, Clara, you go call your lawyer. Madison's email came in at 12:07 a.m., and it was exactly what I expected from a 16-year-old who'd just realized the gravy train had derailed. Dad, WTF? This is so extra. You're literally ruining my life over nothing. Mom said you could come back if you apologize and turn everything back on. Just say sorry and stop being petty. The audacity. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of thinking I was the one who needed to apologize. That I could just come back if I said sorry for the crime of, what exactly? Not wanting to fund the lifestyle of people who'd kicked me out of the family? I saved that email in a special folder I created called Evidence of Delusion. But Patricia's email. Oh, Patricia's email was the crown jewel of entitled outrage. It arrived at 12:09 a.m., and it was 3 paragraphs of pure, unfiltered melodrama. Leo, I have prayed for you tonight. I have asked God to soften your heart and help you see the error of your ways. What you're doing is not just wrong, it's sinful. You are breaking up a family over money. Money. As if money matters more than the bonds of love and matrimony. Your poor daughter is terrified. Your wife is devastated. And for what? Because your pride was hurt? The devil is working through you, Leo, and I pray you realize it before it's too late. This family has given you everything: love, support, a beautiful home. And this is how you repay us? By threatening legal action? By abandoning your responsibilities? I am ashamed to have called you my son-in-law. You need to fix this before you destroy what's left of this family. There is still time to do the right thing. I read it twice, then a third time, each reading making me angrier and more amused in equal measure. The sheer nerve of claiming they'd given me everything when I'd literally paid for everything. The religious guilt-tripping, the emotional manipulation, the complete lack of self-awareness. It was almost impressive in its totality. My fingers started typing a response before my brain could catch up. I got as far as, "Dear Patricia, actually, TurboTax is working through me, and it's much more reliable than your version of God," before I stopped myself. Julian's voice echoed in my head. "Stay professional. Don't engage. Let the silence do the talking." I highlighted the entire draft response and hit delete, watching the words disappear character by character. Then I closed my email client, turned off my phone, and just sat there in the quiet of my office, feeling something that I hadn't felt in a very long time. Powerful. Because here's what I'd realized. Arguing with them was pointless. Getting emotional was pointless. Trying to make them understand was pointless. But invoicing them, treating this whole situation like a business transaction, that was hitting them where it actually hurt. I wasn't their husband or father or son-in-law anymore. I was their creditor. I wasn't asking for their love or respect or understanding. I was demanding an accounting. I wasn't arguing anymore. I was billing. And there's nothing more terrifying to people who've been living beyond their means than suddenly receiving an invoice for all the things they thought were free. I opened my laptop again and added a new entry to my revenge spreadsheet. Date: October 26th, 2025. Action: sent formal notice. Cost to them: priceless. Satisfaction level: immeasurable. Then I went home to my apartment, heated up some leftover Chinese food, and slept better than I had in 15 years. I woke up the next morning in my apartment, a modest one-bedroom place I'd been renting as an office space for the past 6 months, but had secretly been using as a refuge when Clara's constant demands and Madison's teenage drama became too much to handle. Feeling more rested than I had in years. The sun was streaming through the blinds. My phone was still blissfully turned off from the night before, and for exactly 17 minutes, I lived in a peaceful bubble where I could pretend that my entire life hadn't imploded over a plate of roasted chicken. Then I made the mistake of turning my phone back on. The thing about modern technology is that it stores all your problems in a neat little queue and then dumps them on you all at once, like a terrible surprise party where everyone jumps out yelling, "You're screwed." Instead of surprise, I had 127 new notifications, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I thought my phone was going to spontaneously combust from the sheer volume of digital rage being directed at me. But here's where it got interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely bonkers in a way that made reality TV look boring. About 80 of those notifications were from Facebook, which I rarely used except to remember people's birthdays and occasionally post obligatory photos of family gatherings that made us look functional. I opened the app with the kind of dread usually reserved for opening medical bills or checking your bank account after a night of drunk Amazon shopping. Clara had gone nuclear at 7:23 a.m., which meant she'd been awake for hours stewing about my email, probably chain-smoking on the back patio and working herself into a righteous fury. She'd posted what could only be described as a digital declaration of war. The post was public, tagged me specifically, and featured a photo from our 10th anniversary dinner where we both looked happy and in love, which in retrospect was probably the last time I'd felt either of those things. The caption read, "Some people forget who loved them once they start earning money. They forget the sacrifices others made. They forget that success isn't built alone. My heart is breaking for what money and pride can do to a person. Praying for healing. Broken heart # heartbroken # marriage struggles # stay strong." I read it 3 times, each time getting more amazed by the sheer audacity. The woman who'd kicked me out of the family 2 days ago was now playing the victim on social media, rewriting history faster than a politician caught in a scandal. The comments were already piling up, 63 of them in less than an hour. And they were exactly what you'd expect from people who only knew Clara's carefully curated version of our life. Jennifer from her wine night crew. "OMG, Clara, I'm so sorry. You deserve so much better." 2 hearts. Some guy named Brad who I'd never heard of. "Stay strong. Real men don't abandon their families." Patricia, because of course Patricia, "My daughter has been through so much. Some people only care about material things. Praying for you both." Folded hands. I was scrolling through this cesspool of misinformation and performative sympathy, my blood pressure rising with each emoji, when I saw it. A comment that made me actually laugh out loud, startling the neighbor's cat that was sitting on the fire escape outside my window. Aunt Gina posted at 8:47 a.m. "Interesting take, Clara. Didn't Leo pay for your business degree? And the house? And Madison's private school? And pretty much everything else for the last 15 years? Just asking for a friend." Thinking face. The comments section went absolutely silent for approximately 45 seconds. I refreshed the page 3 times thinking my phone had frozen. But no. People had literally stopped commenting because Aunt Gina had just dropped a truth bomb so massive it had created a social media mushroom cloud. Then the thread exploded faster than my utility bills had disappeared from autopay. People were liking Gina's comment, responding to Gina's comment, asking questions, taking sides. Clara's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling in real time, and I had a front row seat to the most entertaining drama I'd seen since Game of Thrones. Except this time I was actually rooting for the protagonist because the protagonist was me. Random person I vaguely recognized from some barbecue 3 years ago. Wait, what? Leo paid for her degree. Another wine night friend, apparently switching sides faster than a politician during election season. I mean, he did always pick up the check at dinner. Someone named Kevin who I absolutely did not know. This is why I'm staying single. Women be crazy. Okay, Kevin was not helping, but I appreciated the energy. Clara responded at 9:03 a.m., and you could practically see the panic in her typing. My education was an investment in our future. Everything I did was for US. Some people here don't know the whole story. Gina, bless her savage heart, replied within 2 minutes. You're right, Clara. I don't know the whole story. That's why I'm asking. What exactly did you invest? Specifically, I'll wait. I screenshotted that entire exchange and sent it to Julian with the message, Gina is my new hero. His response came back immediately. Gina has always been everyone's hero. But speaking of heroes, I need you to call me ASAP. Found something interesting. The way Julian said interesting in his text, I could hear the tone through the words, made my stomach do a weird flip that was half excitement and half dread. Interesting, in lawyer speak, could mean anything from mildly noteworthy to holy crap, call the FBI. I dialed his number before I could overthink it. He picked up on the first ring. Leo, buddy, pal, my favorite client who's having the world's most entertaining midlife crisis. How are you this fine morning? Watching my life implode on Facebook, I said, putting him on speaker and pulling up Clara's post again to see if the comment count had increased. It had. We were up to 94 comments now. Please tell me you have good news. Oh, I have better than good news, Julian said, and I could hear him shuffling papers in the background. I have what we in the legal profession call evidence, and what normal people call receipts that will destroy your enemies. Remember how I told you to send me access to all your financial records? Yeah, you said you wanted to review everything for the divorce proceedings. Right. Well, I found something while digging through your joint savings account history, Julian interrupted, his voice taking on that edge he got when he was about to drop a bombshell in court. Leo, did you authorize a withdrawal of $50,000 from your joint savings on March 15, 2024? I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. What? No. 50 grand. Are you serious? Dead serious. Withdrawn from your joint Wells Fargo savings account, the one you set up for Madison's college fund. The withdrawal slip has your signature on it. Julian, I didn't. I would remember taking out $50,000. That's not exactly pocket change. My mind was racing, trying to remember if there'd been some emergency, some massive expense I'd forgotten about. But no, nothing. March 2024 had been a normal month. Boring, even. That's because you didn't take it out, Julian said slowly, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. Clara did. And she forged your signature. Not even a good forgery, by the way. I compared it to your actual signature on other documents, and it's not even close. She basically just scribbled something that vaguely looked like your name and hoped no one would check. Jesus Christ, I muttered, sitting down heavily on my couch. $50,000. What did she even use it for? According to the notation she left with the bank, home renovations. Want to guess what home renovations happened around that time? I thought about it, scrolling through my memories of last spring. The kitchen, I said slowly. She said she wanted to redo the kitchen. New cabinets, new countertops, new appliances. She showed me quotes from contractors, said it would cost around 30 grand, asked if we could use savings. And you said yes? I said yes to 30,000 for legitimate kitchen renovations, not 50,000 for God knows what. I was getting angry now, that cold, controlled anger that made me really good at my job when clients tried to hide income from the IRS. Julian, where did the other 20 grand go? That, Julian said, is the $1 million question. Or the $20,000 question, technically. But here's what I do know. The kitchen renovations only cost $28,000 according to the contractor's final invoice, which I also found. So we've got $50,000 withdrawn, $28,000 spent on the kitchen, and $22,000 just gone. Gone where? I'm working on that, Julian said. But Leo, here's the important part. She forged your signature. That's fraud. That's actual, prosecutable. Hello, district attorney, level fraud. Combined with the email you sent last night documenting everything, and the fact that she kicked you out of the family, we've got grounds for everything. Asset freeze, emergency financial restraining orders, you name it. I sat there processing this information, watching the Facebook comments continue to pile up on Clara's post while my brain tried to wrap around the fact that my wife had committed actual fraud. Not just emotional betrayal or financial irresponsibility, but literal, Sign your name on the dotted line and go to jail fraud. File it, I said finally. File everything. Asset freeze, restraining orders, whatever you think we need. I want every account frozen, every credit card locked, everything. Music to my ears, Julian said. I'll have the paperwork filed by this afternoon. Leo, by dinner tonight, the only thing running in that house will be the ceiling fan. And that's only because the electric company hasn't caught up yet. We hung up, and I looked back at my phone. Clara's post now had 127 comments, and Aunt Gina was still in there fighting the good fight, asking pointed questions that no one seemed able to answer. I added my own comment, short and sweet. Clara, we should probably talk about that $50,000 you withdrew from our joint savings in March 2024. The one where you forged my signature. Let me know when you're free to discuss. Then I sat back and watched the fireworks begin. The Facebook comment I dropped was the digital equivalent of tossing a grenade into a crowded room and then calmly walking away while everything exploded behind me in slow motion. Within minutes, Clara had deleted her entire post. Poof, gone like it never existed, which was hilarious because the internet is forever and at least 40 people had already screenshotted it. I know this because 3 of them sent me the screenshots with messages ranging from, "Dude, what is happening?" to "This is better than Netflix." The rest of the day passed in a blur of Julian calling me with updates, my phone blowing up with messages from people I hadn't talked to in years suddenly very interested in my personal life, and me sitting in my apartment eating microwave burritos while watching the entire foundation of Clara's carefully constructed social media empire crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. By 5 o'clock, Julian had filed the asset freeze paperwork. By 6, it had been approved by a judge who apparently had no patience for financial fraud. By 7, every single account with Clara's name on it had been locked down tighter than Fort Knox. I was sitting on my couch at 8:15 p.m., watching some mindless cooking show where people made elaborate cakes shaped like things that should never be cakes, when someone started buzzing my apartment intercom. Not just a polite single buzz either, but that aggressive, desperate, hold the button down for 10 seconds kind of buzzing that suggested either an emergency or someone who'd completely lost their mind. Given my week, I was betting on the latter. I walked over to the intercom, pressed the button, and said, "Yeah." "Leo." Clara's voice came through the speaker, crackling with static and what sounded like barely suppressed hysteria. "Leo, I need to talk to you. Please. It's important." I looked at the clock. 8:17 p.m. I looked at the intercom. I looked at my half-eaten burrito sitting on the coffee table. Then I looked at my reflection in the darkened TV screen and had a moment of what I can only describe as crystal clear clarity about exactly how this was going to go. "Come on up," I said, buzzing her in before I could second-guess myself. The thing about living on the 4th floor of a building with a broken elevator is that it gives you time to prepare for whatever's coming. I could hear Clara's heels clicking on the stairs. Those expensive Jimmy Choos I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago that she swore she'd only wear for special occasions, but apparently counted a desperate late-night visit to her estranged husband's apartment as special enough. Each click got louder, closer, and I found myself counting them like a countdown to something I couldn't quite name. At exactly 8:20 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Not the aggressive buzzer assault from downstairs, but a soft, almost tentative knock that was probably meant to make her seem vulnerable and non-threatening. I'd seen this move before, back when Madison was little, and would knock softly on our bedroom door after having a nightmare, and Clara would immediately switch into concerned mother mode. This was concerned wife mode, and I wasn't buying it for a second. I opened the door, and honestly, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Clara looked like she'd been crying for hours, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks that made her look like a raccoon who'd lost a fight with a garden hose. Her hair that was usually perfectly styled now pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that I was 90% sure was actually mine from college. This was strategic vulnerability Clara, dressed to evoke sympathy and remind me of better times. "Leo," she said, her voice trembling in that way that had once made me want to fix whatever was wrong, but now just made me tired. "Leo, please. Can I come in? We need to talk." I stepped aside and let her in, not because I was feeling generous, but because I wanted to hear what kind of spin she was going to put on this situation. She walked into my apartment, looking around like she'd never seen it before, which was funny because she'd been here exactly once, 6 months ago when I first rented it, and had spent the entire visit complaining about how small it was and how the neighborhood wasn't our style. "The lights are out," she said, turning to face me with tears streaming down her face. "At the house. The power's completely out. Madison's terrified. She's sitting in the dark with her phone flashlight, and she's scared, Leo. Your daughter is scared." I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms, and just looked at her. "So turn the power back on." "I can't." Clara's voice went up an octave, hitting that pitch that suggested she was about to fully lose it. "You canceled everything. The electric company said the account was closed, and we need to pay." She stopped, swallowing hard. "We need to pay the outstanding balance plus a deposit to restart service. $1,500, Leo. I don't have $1,500 just lying around." The laugh that came out of me was short, sharp, and completely involuntary. "You don't have $1,500? Clara, you withdrew $50,000 from our savings 8 months ago. Where exactly did that money go?" Her face went pale, and for a second I thought she might actually faint right there on my cheap IKEA rug. That was for the kitchen." "The kitchen cost $28,000, I said calmly, pulling my phone out of my pocket and opening the folder where I'd saved all of Julian's documentation. "I've got the contractor's invoice right here. So where's the other $22,000? Because I'm really curious, Clara. I'm fascinated, actually." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. There were other expenses. Things for the house. Things we needed. Name one." Silence. Beautiful, incriminating silence. "That's what I thought," I said, setting my phone down on the counter. "So let me get this straight. You forged my signature, stole $50,000, spent it on God knows what, kicked me out of the family over dinner, and now you're here because the consequences of your actions are inconvenient? Do I have that right?" "Leo, please." Clara took a step toward me, and I could see her switching tactics, her face softening, her voice dropping to that tone she used to use when she wanted something. "Please, think of Madison. She didn't do anything wrong. She's just a kid. She's sitting in that house right now in the dark, probably on her phone trying to call you, and she's scared. You wouldn't do this to your daughter." And there it was, the guilt card, played exactly when I knew it would be. Use the kid as a shield, make it about Madison's suffering instead of Clara's choices, redirect the blame back to me for being the monster who would let his daughter sit in the dark. "You know what's funny?" I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded, how detached I felt from this entire conversation. Madison had the chance to not be in this situation. When you decided to kick me out of the family, when you both decided, because she nodded, remember? She nodded like she was voting yes on a corporate merger. She could have said, "Hey, maybe don't kick Dad out." She could have called me any time in the past 2 days. She could have sent a text that wasn't demanding I turn the Wi-Fi back on. But she didn't. So no, Clara, I'm not doing this to Madison. You did this to Madison. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? I walked over to my desk, grabbed the manila folder Julian had helped me prepare, and handed it to her. "Here's what's fair. This is a formal demand for reimbursement. Every dollar I've spent over the last 15 years that benefited you directly. Every forged signature, every unauthorized withdrawal, every bill I paid while you treated me like a human ATM machine. You've got 30 days to respond, and if you don't, my lawyer files a formal fraud complaint with the district attorney." Clara stared at the folder like it was a snake that might bite her. She didn't take it, so I set it on the small table by the door. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," I said, walking to the door and opening it. "You made it clear I'm not part of the family anymore. Fine. Families have obligations, but so do creditors. And right now, Clara, I'm your creditor. You've got 29 days and 23 hours to figure out how to respond to that letter." "Leo, wait." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "The dinner ambience you wanted finally arrived," I said, and I couldn't help the small smile that crossed my face. "You should enjoy it. I hear candlelight is very romantic." Her face crumpled, fresh tears streaming down her already ruined makeup, and for half a second I felt something that might have been sympathy. But then I remembered the nod, the forged signature, the 15 years of being taken for granted, and that feeling evaporated like morning dew in August. "Good night, Clara," I said softly, and then I closed the door. I stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps retreat down the hallway, slower this time, heavier, each click of those expensive heels sounding defeated. Then I heard the stairwell door open and close, and she was gone. I walked back to my couch, picked up my burrito, and took a bite. It was cold now, but somehow it tasted better than any meal I'd had in years. I slept like a baby that night, and by that I mean I woke up every 2 hours in a cold sweat wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, then remembered I absolutely hadn't, and went back to sleep with a smile on my face. There's something deeply satisfying about standing your ground when you've spent 15 years being a doormat, even if that ground is the cheap laminate flooring of a one-bedroom apartment that smells faintly of the Indian restaurant downstairs. By the time my alarm went off at 7 a.m., I felt more energized than I had in years, like I'd been living my life with a 50-pound weight on my shoulders, and someone had finally cut it loose. I made coffee. Real coffee from actual beans I ground myself. Not that pod garbage Clara insisted we needed because everyone has an espresso. And settled in at my kitchen table with my laptop to check the damage from last night's visit. My phone had been mercifully quiet since Clara left, which either meant she'd given up or she was regrouping for another assault. Given what I knew about my soon-to-be ex-wife, I was betting on the latter. I was wrong. She hadn't regrouped. She'd called in reinforcements. At 8:47 a.m., while I was enjoying my second cup of coffee and a bagel that I'd toasted to absolute perfection, my phone dinged with a Facebook notification. Patricia had posted again, and this time she'd gone full nuclear. The post was long, like dissertation-level long, with multiple paragraphs, strategic paragraph breaks for emphasis, and enough religious references to make a televangelist jealous. The post started with a photo of Clara and Madison from last Christmas, both of them looking perfect in matching red sweaters that I'd paid for, standing in front of our fireplace with decorations that I'd hung. The caption was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation that would have made a soap opera writer weep with envy. I don't usually air family business on social media, Patricia had written, which was hilarious because the woman treated Facebook like her personal therapy journal and posted about everything from her hemorrhoids to her opinions on what the neighbors should do with their lawn. But sometimes silence enables evil, and I cannot stay silent any longer while my daughter and granddaughter suffer. Oh, this was going to be good. I screenshot the post immediately because I knew Julian would want to see it, then settled in to read the rest of this train wreck. My son-in-law, Leo Collins, has abandoned his family, she continued, and I could practically hear her dramatic voice reading it aloud like she was auditioning for a Lifetime movie. Not just emotionally, but financially. He has cut off all utilities to their home, leaving my 16-year-old granddaughter to sit in the dark. He has frozen their bank accounts, leaving them unable to buy food or basic necessities. He has threatened legal action over money. Money, as if material possessions matter more than the sacred bonds of family. I took a sip of coffee and kept reading, genuinely impressed by her ability to rewrite reality. Clara has given this man 15 years of her life. She supported him through college, through the early years of his career when money was tight, through every struggle and setback. She raised their daughter, maintained their home, and asked for nothing in return except love and respect. And this is how he repays her devotion, by destroying everything they built together over a disagreement. Supported me through college? I'd already graduated when we met. Early career struggles? I'd been making 6 figures by year 5 while she bounced between pyramid schemes. Asked for nothing? The woman had just forged my signature to steal 50 grand. But sure, Patricia, tell me more about how selfless your daughter is. The post went on for 3 more paragraphs, each one more dramatic than the last, culminating in a call to action that included prayer, support for Clara and Madison, and a thinly veiled suggestion that people should reach out to Leo and remind him of his Christian duty to his family. The post had already gotten 43 likes and 28 comments in less than an hour, most of them from Patricia's church friends and Clara's wine night posse offering thoughts, prayers, and absolutely zero critical thinking skills. I was about to close Facebook and go about my day when I saw it. A new comment from Aunt Gina, posted at 9:02 a.m. Patricia, you mean the family that told him not to come home? That family. The one that said he wasn't part of it anymore? Just want to make sure we're talking about the same family here. God bless Aunt Gina. The woman was like a heat-seeking missile for bullshit, and she never missed her target. The comments section erupted immediately. People who'd been posting crying emojis suddenly started asking questions. Someone named Ruth from Patricia's book club wrote, "Wait, they kicked him out first." Another person I didn't recognize commented, "This is giving missing reasons vibes." I screenshot that too, saved it to my ever-growing folder of evidence, and then did something I probably shouldn't have. I called Julian even though it was barely 9 in the morning and he'd probably just gotten to his office. He answered on the second ring. "Let me guess. Patricia posted something insane on Facebook and you need me to tell you whether it's legally actionable. Am I that predictable? You're going through a divorce with a woman who forged your signature to steal 50 grand and a mother-in-law who thinks Facebook is a court of law. Yeah, you're pretty predictable right now." I could hear him typing in the background, probably already pulling up Patricia's post. "Hold on, let me read this disaster. Okay, wow. Sacred bonds. Christian duty. Oh, she played the granddaughter sitting in the dark card. That's bold. And there it is, Gina with the steel chair. Your aunt is my favorite person. She's Clara's aunt, technically, but yeah, she's the only member of that family with a functioning brain." I leaned back in my kitchen chair, staring at the ceiling and trying to decide if this was the most stressful or the most entertaining week of my life. "Julian, is there anything she's saying that could actually hurt me legally? The whole abandonment thing, the claims about cutting off necessities." "Nope," Julian said cheerfully, and I could hear him still typing. "You're separated, which means you have no legal obligation to pay their bills. The house is jointly owned, so you're within your rights to cancel services you were paying for. And this is the important part. She initiated the separation by telling you not to come home. She can't kick you out and then claim abandonment. That's not how any of this works. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, she committed fraud. Like, actual felony-level fraud. She doesn't get to play the victim here." That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy. "You're not crazy. You're just finally seeing clearly after 15 years of gaslighting." Julian paused, and his tone shifted from casual to serious. "Speaking of the fraud, Leo, I need to tell you something. I did some more digging last night after you called, and I found another irregularity." My stomach dropped. "Another one? How many signatures did she forge?" "At least one more that I've found so far. Remember Clara's Aunt Dorothy who passed away about 2 years ago? The one who was supposedly Clara's favorite aunt. Left her some money in the will. Yeah, Clara said it was like 10 grand or something. She said she used it to pay off her car loan." "Right. Well, the inheritance was actually $35,000, not 10. And it wasn't left to Clara. It was left to both of you, jointly, as a married couple. Aunt Dorothy specifically designated it for Leo and Clara Collins, for their future together." Julian let that sink in for a moment. "Clara cashed that check, which required both signatures, and deposited it into a personal account she'd opened without telling you. An account that's now empty, by the way." I sat there processing this information, my coffee going cold in my hand, trying to understand how someone I'd shared a bed with for 15 years could be so comfortable committing fraud. Not once, but multiple times. Not small amounts, but tens of thousands of dollars. So she forged my signature on the inheritance check too. Yep. And I've got a copy of the check from the probate lawyer who handled Dorothy's estate. Your signature looks like a 5-year-old wrote it. Clara's not even good at fraud, Leo. She's just been getting away with it because you trusted her. Past tense is right, I muttered. What do we do with this? I file an amended complaint with the fraud report I submitted yesterday. This shows a pattern of behavior, not just a one-time thing. Pattern of behavior is important because it demonstrates intent and sophistication. Plus, stealing inheritance money? Judges hate that. It's like kicking a puppy. It just makes everyone mad. File it, I said immediately. File everything. I want every single fraudulent transaction documented, every forged signature exposed, every lie brought to light. Music to my ears, buddy. I'll have it filed by lunch. But Leo, I need to warn you. Once I file this amended complaint, things are going to escalate fast. The DA's office will get involved. There might be criminal charges. Clara's accounts will stay frozen, and she's going to absolutely lose her mind. Good, I said, and I meant it. Let her lose her mind. I've spent 15 years losing mine trying to make her happy. It's her turn. We hung up, and I sat there for a few minutes just breathing, trying to process the fact that my wife had stolen not just from our joint savings, but from a dead woman's final gift to us. Aunt Dorothy had been a sweet lady who'd made the best pecan pie I'd ever tasted and always asked about my work like she actually cared about the answer. She'd left us that money because she wanted us to have a good future, to build something together, to be happy. And Clara had taken it, forged my signature, and made it disappear into whatever black hole she'd been funneling money into. By 2 p.m., Julian called back to confirm everything had been filed. By 4 p.m., I got a text from him with a screenshot of the court docket showing that an emergency hearing had been scheduled for the following week. By sunset, and I checked the timestamp on the email notification 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Every single account with Clara's name on it had been frozen by court order, pending investigation into the fraud allegations. I sat in my apartment as the sun went down, painting my cheap IKEA furniture in shades of orange and gold, and thought about how different my life looked now compared to a week ago. A week ago, I'd been a husband and father living in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, funding a lifestyle I couldn't afford for people who didn't appreciate it. Now I was a guy in a 1-bedroom apartment eating takeout and watching his soon-to-be ex-wife's entire world collapse under the weight of her own lies. I should have felt bad. I should have felt guilty. I felt absolutely nothing except relief. The next week was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I was sitting in a lawn chair with popcorn instead of being in one of the vehicles. Clara's perfect suburban life was collapsing faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, and I had the best seat in town to watch it all unfold. The neighborhood found out first. Apparently, when you get your bank accounts frozen for fraud and the cops show up to ask questions about forged signatures, people notice. Carol from next door, the one who always bragged about her son the lawyer, suddenly stopped making eye contact with Clara at the mailbox. The book club quietly uninvited her from next month's meeting. Even the PDA group chat went suspiciously silent whenever she posted. Clara called me exactly once during this time, her voice small and defeated in a way I'd never heard before. "Please," she said, "think of Madison." "I am," I replied, staring out my apartment window at the city lights below. "She'll finally learn that money doesn't grow on guilt." I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked her number. Then I blocked Patricia's number, Madison's number, and for good measure, blocked them all on every social media platform I had. The silence that followed was beautiful. Within 2 weeks, the house sold. The proceeds, after paying off the mortgage I'd been covering for 15 years, were legally wired back to my account per the court's order. Watching those funds hit my balance felt less like victory and more like the universe finally balancing its books. Madison sent me one final text before I blocked her completely. "You won." I stared at that message for a long time, sitting in my apartment with a beer in my hand and absolutely no regrets in my heart. Finally, I typed back, "No, I just unsubscribed." Then I hit send, blocked her number, and deleted our entire text history. Every "can I have money for" message, every "dad please" guilt trip, every conversation that had treated me like a bank instead of a parent, gone. I finished my beer, ordered Chinese food, and felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years, free. Not happy, not sad, not angry, just wonderfully, blissfully free. 3 weeks after the court finalized everything, Julian showed up at my apartment with coffee and the kind of smile that meant he'd just won something big. "It's done," he said, handing me a stack of papers thicker than a phone book. "Clara's accounts are drained. The house proceeds are yours. All the fraudulent charges are legally hers to pay back, and the judge threw in a restraining order for good measure after Patricia showed up drunk to the courthouse, trying to serve you with God's judgment." I laughed so hard I nearly spit out my coffee. She didn't. Oh, she absolutely did. Security escorted her out. It was magnificent. I flipped through the papers, each page representing another nail in the coffin of my old life. Everything was official now. The marriage was over, the debts were assigned, the fraud was documented, and I was legally, financially, and emotionally free. I'd moved into a smaller apartment downtown a week earlier, 1 bedroom, decent kitchen, huge windows that let in actual sunlight. No more dark corners where resentment could hide. No more walking on eggshells. No more funding other people's fantasies while neglecting my own reality. "So," Julian said, settling onto my couch with his coffee, "what are you going to do now? Travel? Date? Join a bowling league? Probably start a YouTube channel," I said, only half joking. "How to get divorced without crying. featuring spreadsheets and spite. Julian nearly choked. I'd subscribed to that. That night, I microwaved leftover lasagna, the good kind from the Italian place down the street, not the frozen garbage Clara used to pretend was homemade, and sat down with my laptop. I opened my old payment records, the spreadsheets that had documented 15 years of financial abuse disguised as marriage, and stared at them for a long moment. Then I hit delete. Watching them vanish felt better than any therapy session ever could. Before bed, I sent Julian one final text. They said I was out of the family. Thanks for making it official. His response came back immediately. Pleasure doing business with you. Drinks next week. Peace isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a man eating lasagna in silence, drinking a beer in a sunlit apartment, surrounded by nothing but his own choices and absolutely zero regrets. I was finally home.